Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Today, I bring you 3 absolutely bone-chilling stories about ex-partners who took obsession to a completely new level. These aren't the typical breakup stories where someone just won't stop calling or shows up at your work once or twice. No, these are stories about people who turned stalking into an art form, who made their former partners' lives a living nightmare, and who proved that sometimes the person you once loved can become the one you fear the most. Before we begin, I want you to know that each of these stories was submitted by real people who lived through these terrifying experiences. The names have been changed to protect their privacy, but everything else you're about to hear actually happened. And trust me, by the time we get to the 3rd story, you'll understand why some people completely change their identity just to escape their past. So let's dive straight into the first story. This one comes from a woman I'll call Sarah, who learned the hard way that some people simply cannot accept when something is over. Sarah had been dating her boyfriend Marcus for about 2 years when she finally decided she had had enough. He was controlling, possessive, and had a tendency to blow up over the smallest things. The breaking point came when he showed up at her job unannounced for the 3rd time in a week, demanding to know why she hadn't answered his messages within 5 minutes. That same night she broke up with him, told him she needed space, and asked him not to contact her again. For about a month, Marcus seemed to respect her wishes. Sarah began to relax, thinking maybe he had finally gotten the message. She was wrong. It started small. She would come home from work to find her apartment door slightly ajar, even though she was sure she had locked it. Items in her room appeared just slightly out of place. A book that had been on her nightstand was now on her dresser. A picture frame was turned at a different angle. Sarah convinced herself she was just being paranoid, until she found a note hidden inside her pillowcase that simply read, "I know you miss me." Her blood ran cold. She immediately called the police, but without proof that Marcus had actually broken in, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested she change her locks and install a security system, which she did the next day. But Marcus was only getting started. A few days later, Sarah woke up to find her car covered in rose petals. They weren't scattered on top like a romantic gesture. They had been stuffed into every crevice, under the windshield wipers, inside the exhaust pipe, so tightly that she couldn't even start her car. When she called her job to explain why she'd be late, her boss mentioned that someone had already called earlier, asking about her schedule. The calls to her workplace soon became daily. Marcus disguised his voice, sometimes pretending to be a delivery driver, other times claiming to be from her doctor's office. He wanted to know what time she worked, when she had lunch, when she left for the day. Sarah's boss was understanding at first, but after 2 weeks of nonstop harassment, they warned her that if the calls didn't stop, she might lose her job. That's when Sarah made the difficult decision to move back in with her parents temporarily. She thought that if she wasn't in her apartment, Marcus would eventually give up and move on. She was wrong again. Within just 3 days of moving back, her parents began receiving phone calls at all hours of the night. Sometimes Marcus would just breathe on the line. Other times he whispered things like, "Tell Sarah I'm waiting for her," before hanging up. The breaking point came when Emma, Sarah's younger sister, was walking home from school and noticed a car following her. It was the same car that had been parked outside their house for a week. Emma managed to hide in a local shop and called her father, who immediately contacted the police. When officers arrived, they found Marcus inside the car with a camera equipped with a telephoto lens and a notebook full of detailed observations about Sarah's family's daily routines. He knew what time her father left for work, which grocery store her mother shopped at, what route Emma took to school, and even when they walked the dog every morning. The notebook contained weeks of notes, all meticulously documented as if it were some twisted research project. Marcus was finally arrested, but that's when Sarah's story took an even darker turn. While he awaited trial in jail, Sarah discovered that the stalking had been going on much longer than she ever imagined. Her landlord called to inform her that Marcus had been paying him cash each month to make copies of her apartment keys, not just after the breakup, but for the last 6 months of their relationship. Marcus had been regularly entering her home while she was at work, going through her personal belongings, reading her diary, and even installing a hidden camera in her bedroom. When the police searched Marcus's apartment, they found hundreds of photos of Sarah taken without her knowledge. Pictures of her sleeping, bathing, getting dressed, and going about her daily life completely unaware she was being watched. They also found detailed plans he had written about their future together, including where they would live after marriage and what they would name their children. In his mind, they were still in a relationship. The breakup had never happened. Sarah had to testify at his trial, where she learned just how far his obsession had gone. The prosecutor revealed that Marcus had been tracking her location with a GPS device hidden in her purse. He had been monitoring her social media through fake profiles. He had even created a detailed timetable of her life and was planning what he called a romantic reconciliation, where he would break into her apartment and surprise her with candles and flowers. Marcus was sentenced to 3 years in prison and given a restraining order valid for 10 years after his release. Sarah moved to another state, changed her phone number, and deleted all her social media accounts. She still looks over her shoulder every time she walks to her car, and she never lived alone again. But as terrifying as Sarah's story is, it doesn't compare to what happened to our second person, a man I'll call David. His story proves that stalking doesn't just happen to women, and that sometimes the person you're trying to escape has resources and connections that make it nearly impossible to hide. David had been married to his wife Jessica for 5 years when he discovered she was having an affair with a coworker. The divorce was messy, but eventually they reached a settlement, divided their assets, and David thought he could finally move on with his life. Jessica kept the house, and David moved into a small apartment on the other side of the city. In truth, he was excited about starting fresh. During the first few months after the divorce, David barely heard from Jessica. She would text him occasionally about paperwork or forgotten belongings, but everything was civil and professional. David started dating again, joined a gym, and began rebuilding his social life. Everything seemed fine until he started noticing some strange coincidences. Jessica showed up at the same restaurants he went to, always claiming it was just a coincidence. He ran into her at the grocery store at the exact time he was shopping, and she acted surprised to see him. When David started going to a new coffee shop near his office, Jessica also began buying her coffee there in the mornings. At first, David thought maybe she just wanted to make him jealous or win him back, but her behavior soon started making him feel truly uncomfortable. Things escalated when David began dating someone new, a woman named Lisa who worked at a marketing firm in the same building. They had been dating for about a month when Lisa mentioned that a woman had approached her at her gym, asking questions about her marital status and whether she was seeing anyone. The woman claimed she was conducting some kind of survey, but Lisa found it strange since she had never seen her at the gym before. David's stomach dropped when Lisa described the woman. It was unmistakably Jessica, but when he confronted her, she denied everything, claiming she had never been to that gym and suggesting David was just paranoid. She told him he was clearly still emotionally unstable after the divorce, and that maybe he should consider therapy. That's when David realized Jessica was playing a much more sophisticated game than he had imagined. She wasn't just showing up randomly, hoping to bump into him. She was systematically collecting information about his life and inserting herself into his world, in ways that looked like coincidences but were carefully planned. David discovered the truth when he learned that Jessica had been calling the management office of his apartment complex, pretending to be his sister, and asking about his lease terms and whether he had visitors. She also contacted his gym under a fake name, claiming she was interested in signing up, and specifically asked about the classes and trainers David used. Unaware, the staff gave her his full training schedule, but Jessica's most unsettling tactic was tied to her job. She worked at a private investigation agency, which gave her access to databases and resources most people couldn't even imagine. She was using those professional connections to run background checks on anyone David started dating. She checked their credit reports, investigated their work histories, and even dug up information about their families and past relationships. When David became serious with Lisa, Jessica took things to a whole new level. She created fake social media accounts and started contacting Lisa's friends and coworkers, spreading rumors that David was emotionally abusive and had a history of cheating. She mixed in just enough true details about David's life to make her stories believable, but twisted the facts to paint him as dangerous. Lisa began receiving anonymous messages warning her about David's supposed violent tendencies and claiming he had been stalking his ex-wife since the divorce. The messages included photos of David taken without his knowledge in various places around the city, supposedly as proof that he was following Jessica. What David didn't realize was that Jessica had followed him to those places first, snapping the photos to make it look like he was the stalker. The campaign against David became so intense that Lisa eventually broke up with him, saying she didn't feel safe continuing the relationship. When David tried to explain what was really happening, it sounded so far-fetched that even his closest friends started to wonder if he might actually be the problem. Jessica's psychological warfare didn't stop there. She began filing false police reports, claiming that David was violating a restraining order that didn't even exist. She called 911 saying she felt threatened by his presence in places she had followed him to. Each time, David had to explain to officers that he was just following his normal routine and had no idea Jessica was nearby. The false reports created a record that made David look unstable and obsessive. Jessica was building a case against him using the very system meant to protect stalking victims. She would even show up at his workplace and stage dramatic scenes in the lobby, crying and saying she was afraid of him, only to leave before security could review the cameras that would prove she was the one provoking the encounters. David's life began to unravel. His boss pulled him aside and suggested he take time off to deal with his personal issues. His friends distanced themselves, unsure of what to believe. His family worried about his mental health because Jessica had also started calling them, expressing concern about his behavior and urging them to encourage him to seek help. The turning point came when David hired a private investigator to document Jessica's behavior. The detective was able to prove that she had been systematically stalking him while simultaneously filing reports claiming he was stalking her. They gathered evidence showing Jessica was illegally using her professional resources to invade David's privacy and harass the people around him. When confronted with the evidence, Jessica's employer immediately fired her and reported her to the state licensing board. She lost her private investigator's license and faced criminal charges for filing false reports and harassment. But even after her arrest, the damage to David's reputation and mental health was severe. He ended up moving to another city and changing careers because the situation had become unbearable. David's story shows how someone with the right knowledge and resources can weaponize the very systems meant to protect us. Jessica turned stalking into a professional operation, using her skills and connections to make David's life a nightmare while portraying herself as the victim. But if David's story seems disturbing, wait until you hear what happened to our third person. This final case involves someone who took obsession to such an extreme level that it sounds like something out of a psychological thriller, except it's completely real. The third story comes from a woman I'll call Rachel, and what happened to her proves that some people are willing to go to absolutely terrifying extremes when they refuse to accept that a relationship is over. Rachel's story is different from the others because her stalker didn't just want her back. He wanted to control and completely remake her entire existence. Rachel had been dating Tyler for about 8 months when she began noticing serious red flags. At first, he was charming, the kind of man who seemed perfect on paper. He had a good job, was well-educated, and could be incredibly attentive when he wanted to be. But beneath that polished exterior was someone who needed to control every aspect of Rachel's life. It started with small things. Tyler would get upset if Rachel wore certain clothes, saying they were too revealing or inappropriate. He showed up unannounced at her apartment with groceries, insisting he just wanted to be helpful. But then he would reorganize her kitchen and throw away food he didn't approve of. When Rachel mentioned these incidents to her friends, Tyler somehow found out and accused her of trying to turn people against him. The breaking point came when Rachel discovered that Tyler had been going through her phone while she slept. He wasn't just reading her messages. He was replying to people, pretending to be her. He turned down invitations to social events, telling her friends and family she was busy or not feeling well. Rachel realized she had been slowly isolated from her loved ones without even noticing it. When she finally gathered the courage to break up with him, Tyler's reaction was unlike anything she had ever experienced. He didn't get angry or act hurt. Instead, he stayed completely calm and told her that he understood she was just confused and going through a difficult time, but that he would wait for her to come to her senses. The way he said it made Rachel's skin crawl, because it was clear he truly believed she wasn't serious. Tyler moved out of her apartment but left behind what he called a care package, a box filled with vitamins, herbal supplements, and a detailed nutrition plan he had created for her. The note attached said he had researched her family's medical history and wanted to make sure she stayed healthy while they were apart. Rachel had never told him anything about her family's medical background. That's when Rachel realized Tyler had been investigating her past. In the weeks that followed, she discovered he had been contacting her relatives, former co-workers, and even friends from school. He presented himself as someone deeply concerned about Rachel's well-being and claimed he was worried about certain changes in her behavior. People shared personal information with him because he seemed like a devoted and genuine boyfriend. But Tyler's investigation went far beyond just talking to people. Also, somehow he had gained access to her medical records and had been analyzing her prescription history. He knew about a depressive episode she had in college, a minor eating disorder she struggled with in her 20s, and even details about therapy sessions she had years earlier. Tyler had compiled all of this into what he called a wellness profile and had been using it to manipulate her throughout their entire relationship. These 3 stories show us just how far some people will go when they refuse to accept that a relationship is over. Sarah's nightmare with Marcus, David's systematic destruction at the hands of Jessica, and Rachel's complete psychological manipulation by Tyler. These are not isolated incidents. They happen to people everywhere, and the terrifying truth is that technology and social media have made stalking easier than ever before. If you or someone you know is living through a similar situation, please seek help. Document everything, trust your instincts, and remember, you don't have to face it alone. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.